Let's hit rewind this week and take a quick listen to some moments from some of my favorite episodes from the past year. It's awfully hard to pick favorites from over 50 guests I hosted in 2024. Each episode was wonderful in its own way. But this episode features great moments from Kent Morita, Stacy Sherman, Jarad Haggard, Luke Jamieson, Sarah Caminiti, Lindsay Haun, Matt Beran, Tenumah, Jarad Haggard, Tony Wan, and Justin Robbins. Let's get to it.
Welcome to Next in Queue, the podcast for contact center and customer experience professionals. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy 2 Vision. Eliminate blind spots and see right through every conversation with Happy 2 Vision. Learn more at happitu.com. Now, here's your host, Rob Dwyer.
Kent Morita, thanks for joining the show.
I have this hot take about the Turing test. I don't think Turing really imagined that people will be getting so much help from machines in writing and expressing themselves that it's almost like it's less about the machine tricking humans that the machine is human. It's almost like we're converging. Like the way we express is being informed by autocorrect and auto suggestions on type. So by definition, the Turing test gets easier and easier to pass. So that's a really kind of related thought, but I think that even that test, which is kind of considered the gold standard of implying sentience, is becoming less and less relevant.
I want to, number one, ask you, is the bobcat your favorite animal?
The bobcat? Yes, I would say so.
And why? Why is that the case?
So I was the NYU mascot.
So awesome.
And believe it or not, NYU does have a sports team. We're great. And the bobcat was our animal. It stands for Bobst Catalog. Like to emphasize how non-sporty we are,
That's
we named
super nerdy.
we came up with a library called the Bobst Library, and then there was this new computer system that cataloged it, and then they were like, Bobst Catalog, Bobcat. Oh, maybe we could have a animal. Like, it's all backwards. But anyway, my hometown from California is Los Gatos, the mountain lions. So yeah, I have an affinity for big cats.
Okay, so what was the best sport to be at as the bobcat? Like, where were the crowds the best?
So that's tough. So for my personal comfort, hockey was the best because
it's cold.
It's cold, and inside that costume, you are very, very warm. So it's nice to not have to take a break every 10 minutes because you are drenched in there in sweat. But the hockey games seem to bring out a lot of the frat bros, and they just thought it was okay to just like punch me, you know? It made no sense. I'm like, you're an adult, you know that there's a person in here. Like, what are you doing? It was crazy. The basketball games were amazing. Mainly because I think it's like it was like an easier place to interact with fans. But in particular, there was this 5-year-old girl who I think was like the assistant coach's daughter, and she became a huge fan of mine and would bring like these drawings of me, would come to like she had one of those Disney like autograph books, but she wanted me to sign it, you know. So because of her, the basketball games, I think, is number one in terms of my favorite place to perform.
What an amazing story. Well, I want to switch gears to something a little less scary, but maybe just as exciting. I've got my pirate mug with me today for my coffee, just for you. Can you tell us about Story Pirates?
Yeah, I love talking about the Story Pirates. So I've been doing improv for 13 years now. And I love improv. It's what gives me a lot of joy. And Story Pirates is this organization. And we go to these public schools and we do an improv show for kids. And our goal is to kind of give the kids an aha moment of they have these silly ideas. They're like, I wish there was like a sponge who is a princess, and they really want to eat hot dogs. They have these ideas, and we say yes and we play that character. That's literally a character I played because of a kid, and we just yes and fully commit, and for 45 minutes we create an entire play, a comedy play based on these kids' ideas, and you can see in the kids' faces like, oh wait, my ideas could be a thing. And then we take them through story writing seminars and classes, and just get them excited about making things. And yeah, it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. I love working with kids. I love just trying to inspire them to use their voice and express themselves. That's one of my favorite things. Yeah.
It reminds me of Whose Line Is It Anyway, but with an audience full of children, which just sounds like so much fun.
It's so fun, and these kids are just geniuses. You know, they would come up with ideas that are like, one kid was like, "You're Sarah, you're a sponge." And we were like, "So what does Sarah want to do?" And they were like, "Sarah wants to go but can't." And I'm like, this is like a koan. This is like, what does that even mean? It's so trippy. So like we had to play it, and I'm like this character that wants to move to the stage right but can't, or like wants to say something but can't. And it just created this like super trippy scene that's really funny, but I'm like, oh man, that kid's a genius. He's dropping some Nirvana bombs into this set. It was amazing.
How long before they no longer need you on the stage and they're just entering prompts?
So I honestly think that's something that's really cool. If kids, not like, I think there's always value in seeing adults do things and make something funny, and there is like this magic to it. One of my favorite moments doing Story Pirates, I went to a public elementary school in the Bronx, and I did a scene, and in the crowd there were some kids that were reacting especially differently, and I couldn't quite catch who they were or what they were doing. But the next scene, I get to face the audience and address them and do this like little monologue. And I looked out for those little pockets, and they were all East Asian kids that were laughing extra hard at me. And it was like the most gratifying experience, because I was like, yes, I remember being in your seats at assemblies, and I didn't see people like me doing silly things on stage.
Mm-hmm.
And that sort of experience comes from people doing things in front of you. So I think there's value in that, and I think that's where humans are always going to be inspiring. But story parts can't go everywhere all the time. Now we have a podcast in an effort to scale and give that mind-blowing experience to kids everywhere. But I think like ChatGPT and Gemini, kids could literally come up with, I want you to write a story about a hot dog loving princess who just wants to like ask Mustard Prince out on prom. These like LLMs could do that, and then it will show the kid like, wait, that could actually be viable. My silly idea is now something. And just showing that 0 to 1 is possible, I think is a big value. And yet, I think that's why this is something that I've been trying to work on. It's a real nascent idea, but I want to create a kind of a guidebook for teachers to use these LLMs in classrooms to get kids excited about how their silly ideas might become real, but then hopefully integrate it with the Common Core curriculum to get them to take that 0 to 1 and then teach them the techniques of writing and everything to get that 1 to 100 and make it really their own. So I think there's really a lot of exciting, hopeful things there of getting kids to be excited about creating things. So yeah, I'm fairly optimistic, and yeah, it's I'm fairly optimistic in the value of live performance as well.
Well, I love that. And let me tell you, Kent, you are one of the humans that inspires me.
Thank you.
I have had so much fun talking to you today. I have the real Luke Jamieson here with me.
As they say, you don't work with animals or children. And I've got a dog on my lap who is excited that I just got home after dropping the kids off at school. And it was... I rushed in, so this is real. There was no 1 hour prep beforehand, get myself ready. It was drop the kids off, haul ass back here to get on the podcast. So you've got the real me, I promise.
Not even your kids will love you as much as that dog does, I guarantee you.
I'm not sure, but mate, I have a cracking story for you, and I know this has got nothing to do with this episode, other than maybe it's just trying to be as authentic as possible. But I know last time when I was on the podcast, we talked a bit about like Australia and animals, and how there's this assumption that there's just kangaroos everywhere kind of thing.
Oh no.
I'm not joking you. I'm just coming up the road. I'm about a block away from my house, and a kangaroo jumps out in front of the car and then goes into the petrol station or the gas station and just hops into the gas station. And I've just like hit the brakes, grabbed the phone, quickly caught a video of it. So I will send you the video so you can see it's real. But a kangaroo kangaroos everywhere here, mate. It's just, that's how it is.
Sarah Hatter, you are next in queue. Thank you for joining me. How are you?
I'm excited. That was such an intense countdown, because usually it's like, 3, 2, 1 or whatever. This was like, I feel like I was cutting in a movie, like 5, 4, like launching a space shuttle. So this better be good with all that anticipation is what I'm saying.
What are some of the things that you would encourage people to use to evaluate an event in trying to figure out, like, do I go to this one? Do I go to that one? Do I go over here? Do I go over there? What are some of the things that you think are important? You've been to tons of events as a speaker, running an event, etc. So what do I do?
I think the number one thing is figure out what is your goal going to these events. Is your goal to meet other people who do your job and to learn from them and to make those connections? Is your job your own career advancement? Is your job to come back to your team saying, I learned some amazing stuff, we're going to start implementing whatever it is? sometimes you'll find, I know we do on our website, there's little letters that people write, like convince your boss to send you to this, but you need to do that work on your own. What are you going to this event for? If your company's paying for it, look, I'm a huge advocate of just like taking the money and run, right? If they're going to send you somewhere, like buy a ticket, go. If you want to go to Vegas, right? But when it comes down to like what these events are about, they're all so different. And you and I know, like, there's a lot of events that are just really, no one cares about the program. No one's there for the talks. No one's there to see who's on stage. Doesn't matter. It's just like, they want to go, like, South by Southwest is a really good example of that. Very, very, very few people that go to South by Southwest are planning in advance what they're going to go see and what they're going to do. It's so much like you're in the tidal wave of it when you're there, and you're really there for the experience. With larger events, I think you have more leeway for that. With smaller events, you've got to think about the price point. You've got to think about what the schedule is, who's going to speak, what the topics are, and how, if any of those topics are really relevant to bringing home to your team. And from an event producer standpoint, you know, I can say for myself, we think very deeply about how to present this information to you. How do we get people on stage who are not repeating the same thing over and over and over? You know, I think even like 5-6 years ago, we got to an inflection point where I told people, like, we're not talking about getting a seat at the table anymore. We're already at the table. Like, I'm sick of hearing it. We need to act like we're at the table. We need to act like we own the table. Let's level up. And that was also at a great time when our audience was moving up in their career and leaving some of that icy behavior behind, or those like easy touch points behind. So now we're seeing people talk a lot more about mental health at the workplace. We're seeing people talk about how COVID and the pandemic, especially being on the front lines and support, affected our jobs, how AI is affecting our jobs. Heavy topics, not just, here's a great way to create a tagging taxonomy. Like, that's not what we do. If that is where you are in your career, you need to find a conference that offers you that kind of content, like really good career development for someone who's an independent contributor now who wants to be a manager for the first time. We're a little bit beyond that kind of stuff, but that is great for you to know whether that's what you're looking for, I think. The worst thing, I think, for me is to go to an event or to get excited about an event, and it's just sort of like, this is just a dumb event. I'll give you an example of this, and this is so dorky, but you're a dork, so you'll love it. I went to this event one time at the Morgan Library. It was Tolkien week, and as you can tell from all my accoutrement here, like, I'm a big fan of the professor's work. So I had gone to this event where it promised, you know, a couple of speakers who had written books about the writings of Lord of the Rings, etc. And it didn't end up being that. It ended up being a bunch of dorks in a room together reading somebody else's, like, essay about Tolkien, right? And when you get to that point where you're just like, I could have done this better. I have more knowledge, or I know more about this. It's just so frustrating to not have that need met that you're really excited about. And I think sometimes we get stuck as event producers. We get really stuck on the flash of things. The flashy sponsor, or the flashy party, or the flashy speaker, the keynote speaker, or whomever it might be, without thinking, like, what are they going to say on stage? I've certainly done that. We've had people go on stage and say stuff that I'm like, that's not good at all. Like, that's a really dumb way to look at the world, but go you. So I think it's really important, I think, for attendees as well to be in charge of their destiny, if you will, at these events. Who are the speakers? How are they relevant to me in my career? How are they going to be relevant to my team? And what am I going to get out of this? I think that's the best way to really find something that fits for you.
You were talking about that Tolkien event, and it reminded me of this story I saw about this Willy Wonka event that got put on that made headlines.
The best thing that's happened in events in 2024. That entire event, and I was a deep diver into because I'm like, well, how did this happen? How did this happen? Right? The whole event was created by AI. Every single thing, every single bit of it was AI, which to me was fascinating. But you would have been completely disappointed if you brought your kids to that event.
Yeah. Yeah. A beautiful disaster is what that was.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I've been at events before that promised to be, you know, a top tier tech event of the century and had 12 people in a room to watch me speak. Not even 12 people who wanted to watch me speak, just 12 people. Right. So, you know, it's hard. I understand that it's hard, but I also think having an ethos about what work you're putting out into the world, which I certainly do, I am very opinionated about the work I put out into the world, really helps create something that is going to speak to the most amount of people. That's the goal.
Speaking of speakers, I want to talk about speakers for a moment. In particular, keynotes, right? Headliners.
Yeah. Yeah.
How should I, as a potential attendee or vendor, look at big names that everyone has heard of being at an event? Like, what does that mean for me? Does that mean there's going to be a lot of people there? I'm going to get a lot of business as a vendor?
Are you talking about celebrity
speakers?
Or do you just mean like
maybe
headliners?
Maybe.
Maybe. Gosh, you are just making me go hot take express on this, aren't you? 6 or 7 years ago, God, first of all, I hate to break it to you, but 2019 was 5 years ago. So
it was.
It really was. So when I say 6 or 7 years ago, I'm not talking about 2013. Okay,
right.
I'm talking
Even
about 2018. It might feel like it, but I'm just giving you contextually where we were in time. I had spoken at an event with the CEO of HubSpot, and he was fantastic. I met him and his wife, and he said, we're actually doing an event. Do you want to come? Martha Stewart speaking. And I remember thinking, like, what? Isn't she in jail? Like, thinking in my head, like, what? And also, like, I don't know marketing very much, so I'm just sort of like, why is Martha Stewart talking about marketing? But then I was like, maybe Martha Stewart learned marketing in jail, and this is what she's going to, like, revamp her career. Maybe she's involved with HubSpot to, like, make it happen, right? No, she wasn't. She was just on a roster. And these companies reach out to every single giant company that has an in-house event or that sponsors events and say, here's our list of potential speakers. Are you interested? And they pick one and then they market it. Come see Tom Brady talk about inbound marketing at HubSpot. Like, what does Tom Brady know about inbound marketing at HubSpot? He doesn't. But it gets people in the room and it ties him to that brand, right? And then whatever money is spent on him, which I'm guessing is in the multiple six figures, right? Same with Martha, probably. That is counted as a loss at the end of the year for that company on their tax returns. So it's huge benefit for them to spend that money to get a celebrity and then get the buzz about the celebrity's going to be here and then whatever. And I think it's just, it depends on what your goal is at the end of the day, right? I would never go to an event like that because that's not my goal. If I'm going to spend time to go to an event, especially related to my work, I need to learn something. I need to hear from an expert, someone who's done my job, someone whose job I want to do. I don't want to do Tom Brady's job.
Next in queue, Jarad Haggard guesting.
And the way I got that job was I was working at Party City in the same plaza, but I don't cite that on my resume because I'm embarrassed to say I was really bad at that job because I had to blow up the balloons. And when I would botch that and they would pop, I would get so scared. My heart would race. And I'm just like, I don't like doing this. So I was on my lunch break one day and I walked into the GameStop that was in the same plaza next door. And my manager, Brad Kitchen, who was not my manager yet, but he said, hey man, I had the like goofy little purple vest on with my box cutter in the little pocket. And he was like, hey man, do you like that job? And I looked him square in the face and I said, do you think I like this job? And he goes, well, why do you work there? And I said, because I'm 15 years old and they offered me money. And he goes, hold on a second. And he goes down into the drawer. And this is PS1 still carried as GameStop stock era. He pulls out the three following titles. He pulls out Legend of the Dragoon, Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, and what was the last one? Vagrant Story. And he puts them on the counter and he says, "Do you know what these things are?" And I said, "Yes, I own copies of each one. I haven't finished every single one of them, but I have finished Persona 2 Eternal Punishment." And he said, "Do you want to work here instead of Party City?" And I said, "Yes." And on my first shift with him, which was a training shift and only 2 hours long, he showed me how to shrink wrap my hands together in the shrink wrap machine. And that was the lesson that I took from that day, because that's all I can remember about 15 years later.
Stacy Sherman is next in queue. Stacy, author, podcaster, consultant, LinkedIn learning instructor, and all around awesome person. You come from a rather long line of women doing incredible things. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, my grandparents were both certified accountants. And what's unusual about this story, besides a woman being an accountant at that time, my grandmother, my grandfather had basically stayed home and helped with the kids while she went to go get her certifications. So that's unusual. And then they raised their 4 girls, one of them my mom, to be in business. All of them were certified accountants, but 2 of them left the field, including my mom, to go to Wall Street. And it just really shows that they were ahead of their times. And even my mom, through the different fields she took, from being an accountant to other roles and then ultimately on Wall Street, she was a game changer. She was a change agent. She was my role model. So I come from good blood.
Despite having these amazing role models in your life, I have to imagine that you've experienced many of the headwinds that all women have faced. Can you talk about some of the existing challenges that are out there that we still haven't overcome?
Yes. So I'm talking from 2 points of view. So one is the Stacy who, for 25 plus years, I was always in corporate in different industries. Only since the last year have I been an entrepreneur. And so there's different perspectives, but I'll talk about the one that Stacy, who grew up in corporate in different roles in companies and industries. And so the common theme across those roles was that it was a matter of feeling excluded in various situations. Now, I remember I was sitting in a cubicle and there were these glass windows, which were meeting rooms. And I would look through and see the people meeting, and I could see the whiteboard and the topics discussed. And they were very related to the projects I was working on. And I remember feeling so upset because why was I not in that room? There was no women in that room. So it wasn't personal against Stacy Sherman. But I did say to a friend after the fact, I said, I would have liked to be there. I did advocate for myself, as my mother taught me. She said, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So I asked, and then I was invited thereafter. But think about all the people that don't ask. Why was it that I needed to ask when it was very relevant to the projects we were working on together? That's one example. So here's another example, very concrete, that hurts my heart. And yet I want people to hear this because it can change. It's so easy. And that is, so when I worked at the elevator industry, and there were very few women mechanics, technicians that go and repair the elevators. And so I met one in particular, and she was fabulous. And she said that she couldn't wear the uniform very easily because it was made for a guy, including the hard hat. There was no place for her to put a ponytail. Right? So we're talking about design, design for differences. I mean, that's just not like, that doesn't take an AI, that doesn't take a high tech cost. This is about belonging and inclusion of all humans. And so when you design a hard hat for someone to do a job, it's designed, right, for all people, or at least multiple use cases. I remember cars were built for men with seatbelts. And there's some really hardcore data around that women were dying more because it wasn't designed for her. So it's really about belonging. It's about inclusion. It's about designing for all people. And it's about inviting to the room because of our brains, not because of a quota.
Dan Smitley is next in queue.
WFM has knowledge agents don't have. WFM has this deep knowledge around volume and forecasting, right? Whether that's voice or tickets or email or whatever it is, we've done the hard work of diving into the data to say, when's this interaction going to happen? What kind of an interaction is it going to be? How long is it going to take? We have done all sorts of forecasting. And so because we know the arrival pattern, at least in large accuracy percentage, we know the arrival pattern. We can then say, well, based upon this arrival pattern, this is the time to do the fun stuff. That might be the breaks, that might be the birthday parties, that might be the coaching. I wouldn't call bathroom breaks necessarily fun, but it's these non-productive states, right? The non-productive states are happening in the low periods. And so we know, oh my God, noon's a crazy hour. We can't have anyone going to lunch there. And so we schedule all of these interactions, and we schedule all of these kind of off the phone, off email, non-productive activities whenever the business can accommodate them, when the customers aren't going to be calling in, when the customers aren't going to be needing help. So that's the reason why we get down to that granular level, is because we have insight and knowledge that almost no one else in the organization does. We've done so much review of the hard numbers, and we have such a clear understanding of what's going to happen. We feel comfortable saying, this is what we need to do, when we need to do it, and why we need to do it.
Tell me about the customer as it relates to WFM, because I got to think, as a customer, I really just don't care.
Sure. Right. You think that. The workforce management professionals are always challenged to try to explain what we do. It's one of the kind of the funny things when you get a room of WFM and everyone kind of has a different definition. And so you're always curious, like, what's your airplane pitch? Like, how do you, and if, if I want to shut people up, I'm just like, I'm a forecaster and analyst. Like, I look at numbers and I data crunch all day long, and that normally shuts people up. But the better answers, right? If I want to engage, it's the scenario of, like, you ever call a contact center? Yeah. And you waited a long time? Yeah. It's because they weren't doing my job well. Like, workforce management, when done well, like we said, is forecasting out volume, right? Whether that's chats or emails or tickets or whatever it is, right? We're forecasting out what's happening Monday at 8 a.m. We know that people need to be there, but why do people need to be there? Why do we need to have, so we have this many calls, they're going to handle this long. Why do we need that many people? We need that many people because we want to make sure our customers aren't waiting. And when we miss our forecast, when we get those numbers wrong, and yet the staff shows up, who suffers? A little bit of the staff, right? Whether that's because they're sitting around bored or they're just back-to-back calls and it's just burning them out. They get impacted to some extent. Business a little bit, right? People are sitting around not doing anything that's bad for the business. They have a little. Who really gets impacted are the customers. When we screw up our job, the customers feel it because they're having to sit on hold forever. And then when they finally get to the agent's exhausted and frustrated because the calls have been back to back, and they probably have had WFM on the side being like, hey, agent, I need you to move faster. Hey, agent, can you get off that call? Hey, agent, I need you to. And so the agent is frustrated because WFM's panicking. And now the agent's talking to this customer who's been on hold for the past 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and however long. They're frustrated. Agent's frustrated. And just everything's falling apart. Why would that customer come back? Why would they want to come and call again? They're going to do everything they can to not have to interact with this business again. And why? What is at the core of that? WFM doing a bad job forecasting. WFM missing the ball. WFM not knowing how many people needed to be there to be able to handle the customers. WFM is doing their job well. Everyone's happy. It's a nice, even pace for the agents. They can breathe. The organization's getting the return that they need. Their labor is being appropriately leveraged, and the customer feels seamless. They come in, they get answered. It's an appropriate amount of waiting time, and it's nice and simple and easy. When WFM does their job well, everyone should be mostly happy. Mostly happy.
Hey, Sarah Caminiti, you are next in queue. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I am so happy to be here. I am so glad that I am sitting with you on a Monday. And I'm doing great. How are you?
I am fantastic, although I have to warn you, while we are getting ready to record this, I can see the wind coming in. It's been cloudy all day, and it's tornado season here in the Midwest. So I do know that things are moving in, and hopefully they don't get really nasty while we're recording. But if for some reason I disappear, hopefully it's just the power and not my house being taken to Oz. But, that's what happens when you live in Kansas. It's possible.
It's true. It's true. I watched The Wizard of Oz with my son for the first time this weekend, and I am here to guide you through this Kansas tornado journey as best I can if you need it.
So I have to ask, how old is your son, and what was the reaction to watching that movie?
I have two little boys. One is 1 year old and the other is 4. And Wizard of Oz was my favorite movie growing up. I'm talking watching it 3 times a day. Obsession was Dorothy, I think 4 or 5 times for Halloween.
Wow.
So I really leaned in hard, and I've been setting the stage for this introduction for a little while. We've done books, we've done songs. We've talked about it because The Wizard of Oz is very different from The Nightmare Before Christmas, which is his favorite movie, and is not as bright all the time as what is out there today. So we set the stage, and he was hooked, totally hooked. It was a blast. Yeah.
It's really amazing how a really well-crafted story and production can age as well as that one has aged, because I mean, we're talking about a movie that's nearly 100 years old at this point, and it's still delighting kids of all ages today.
It was magic. It's still magic. It's while I will say, as an adult watching it, I haven't watched it in so long. A lot of things stood out. The costumes were much, I don't want to say homemade, but they carry just a very special quality that I completely glossed over when I was a kid watching it all. So that was fun too.
Yes, those people who work in costuming these days in Hollywood, I mean, it's pretty amazing what they pull off. And their budgets, though, are probably a little bit different, I imagine.
Slightly different. Yeah.
Well, they do a great job supporting productions, and support teams do a great job supporting products. You like what I did there? And we're going to talk about support teams today. That was my really, I don't know. I thought that was a clever attempt at a segue. I'm not so sure that it worked out, but we're going to go with it anyway.
Nailed it. Totally nailed it.
Justin Robbins, welcome to the show, and cheers.
Well, Rob, a number of years ago, I learned that one could get certified as a competitive barbecue judge through the Kansas City Barbecue Society. And me being a lover of smoked, frankly, it doesn't even have to be meat, smoked anything, cheeses, fruits. You can smoke fruits. They make wonderful spreads. I love barbecue. I love learning. So I decided to spend a weekend getting certified through KCBS as a barbecue judge, as well as a table captain, which is really just the person who kind of presents and kind of makes the whole thing flow as you're running a barbecue competition. So now for the better part of 10 years, we'll hobby around both in cooking competitive barbecue, but also sitting on the other side of the judges table and judging barbecue competitively.
I am a big fan of barbecue myself. So my first question, for someone who maybe has only had kind of the general, like very popular things that get barbecued, what's a hidden gem? Whether that's a cut of meat or a type of meat, what's something that you've had barbecued that you're like, more people should know about this because it's amazing?
So many places I can go with this question. I'm gonna go with the first two that came up because I probably could go a lot of places. One of the foods that I love doing almost a bit of a reverse sear in that I'll smoke it and then kind of finish it off is tri-tip. Love a mean tri-tip sandwich that's been smoked and then you kind of flash it off. That's so tasty. To me, the food I love the most that freaks people out is cow tongue, and we'll do it in tacos. But so amazing. And the same thing, like you smoke it and then do a bit of a saute with onions and peppers, and so good, so good, so good. It's. I have 2 in my freezer right now that I'm like, I just need to get enough people together who are willing to try it because once you try it, it's so good.
Count me in. We'll have to make a date because I will try just about anything once.
Yeah.
Okay, so my real question on the heels of that, can it be on the tongue of that? No, it's definitely on the heels. On the heels of that, I know that you have called barbecue bragging food. I'd like you to dig into what we can learn about customer experience from the barbecue world, from competitive cooking.
Yeah. There's probably three big lessons, at least that I've taken away from barbecue and kind of the say subculture that surrounds it. And the first for me, going back to the thing we talked about earlier in terms of subjective excellence, is that there are many styles of barbecue. You and I, Rob, may not agree that there are many styles. There are some that are very questionable. There are even some barbecue sauces that I don't think belong in the realm of sauces, not to call any of them out here. But what's really cool about that is it's both a factor of regional influence, but also cultural influence. And because barbecue in a lot of places originates from, frankly, not not the wealthy areas, because it's using available resources and very cheap cuts often of meat to produce something amazing. Is it I think it just has like colored the way that the food kind of brings people together, and also just like has special people have special feelings and thoughts associated with it. The first part that's kind of, to me, when I think about customer experience, is to recognize that it doesn't matter how many books have been written, how many articles you and I have written about change management, or any of those things. What matters is that, for us as businesses, we are in a very unique place, and that place could be, how we were founded, what we're about, what we provide, and our customers are very unique. And we're not going to be able to, walk into another person's business and immediately provide the way we do things for our customers, and our business don't immediately translate to, what we're doing somewhere else. And so the same, way is like, my certification is through the Kansas City Barbecue Society. If I were to go to Texas, there are certain things that just don't translate. If I were to go to Eastern North Carolina, there are certain things that don't translate in barbecue. And I think we need to recognize that for all of us and our products and our customers that we serve, like, your style of doing business, of customer experience, like it's right for who you are and who you're serving. And so don't get distracted. Like, don't try to be Texas barbecue when you're in Eastern North Carolina and it's all about whole hog and a vinegar-based sauce, right? It's like, recognize how you can be uniquely you. That I think is the first lesson that I got out of it. Second for me, really does have to come with the importance of metrics and understanding what is actually predictive and what is reflective. And, the examples that I give when I talk about barbecue in this context is my reflective measures. If I'm in a competition, part of it's my score. And by the way, there are no 10s in KCBS because there's always opportunity to get better. So the highest you can get is a 9. But
Don't
you've got
tell Net Promoter System that.
Right. Yeah. Well, don't get me going, Rob. You've got, so the score could be it, the verbatims could be it. But for me, if I'm cooking for my friends and family, let's be honest, most times that's where when I'm cooking barbecue, it's for friends and family. I have, like, are there leftovers? If there are no leftovers, I did a great job. How silent do things get once the food is out? Like, these are the things that start to be the indicators for me of whether or not I cook good barbecue. They're reflective of good barbecue. Predictive, if I'm doing brisket, I know if I'm cooking brisket, the wood I'm using is post oak. I know that my pit is set to 225 degrees. I know that the only thing I'm putting on that beef is a 50-50 blend of fresh crushed cracked pepper and salt. Like, those are the things that I know. I know that I'm going to start feeling it at 195 degrees, and somewhere between 195 and 205, it's going to be ready. And the only indicator is that it jiggles like Jello, right? These are the things that, to me, all become predictive of whether or not that brisket is going to be left over, and I'm going to have to chop it and sauce it or throw it in mac and cheese, or it's going to be gone. So that to me is, are we actually tuned in to, I think we're tuned into the reflective things, but are we really tuned into what are the predictive things for our business that are going to get us to the outcome that we want? And again, in my observation, for a lot of us, we're not, just because we haven't spent the time to really understand to the way that barbecue is in so many ways a science. Is this going to get us where we want to go? I think the third piece for me, and probably the part I love most about barbecue, is the power and the importance and the impact of community. And barbecue is not just a bragging food, but it's a thing that brings people together. It gets people talking. People like look forward to that. And I think for all of us, doesn't matter what you are doing as a business, like how are we effectively leveraging our communities? And, this can be everything from, you're helping people buy their home for the first time. It can be, people's end of life, and you're part of that process. Like there's so many like heavy or not things that we as organizations can do, and in every single one of those circumstances, like we are invited into the human experience. And how do we make the human experience better, more meaningful as a result of the role we play in that? That to me is the other lesson that I think it's really easy for us to like, hey, we're just like helping people, check the balance on their 401k, or we're just helping people, plan business. Like there's all these things that we're just, and we don't recognize that there really is, greater impact at play there. So I think at a quick, level, Rob, those are three things at least that I've learned a bit about barbecue that I've translated into my work in understanding and serving customers.
Cheers to that, Justin. Cheers to that. Lindsay Haun, you are next in queue. How are you?
Hello, Rob Dwyer. Ain't no party like a Rob Dwyer party.
That's
Because
right.
a Rob
That's right.
Dwyer party has action figures. I'm loving it.
Look, they are minifigures. If one wants action figures, they go to Mattel. I am a Lego guy.
I understand and appreciate it. I
They
get
are
it,
much
man.
smaller, wider, have disproportionately large heads.
I relate quite a bit to that, apparently. I am, except for the small part. I'm freakishly tall because I drank a lot of milk and grew up next to a power plant. But everything else you named, totally there. It's kind of like Drake said, I started from the bottom, now I'm here. So I started out taking credit cards over the phone, working at video stores, all sorts of random stuff, and just worked my way into leadership. Somehow they've given me a seat at the table. They've regretted it ever since. And I'm a nerd herder is what I call it. I help run organizations that usually have a technical focus, but there's always a customer support aspect to it. So that's what I do. Because, I'm not so funny on stage, but I can give a hell of a PowerPoint because people don't expect you to have a personality. So you throw a couple zingers in and they're like, this is amazing. So that's kind of what I do. I do have quite the history of working at places that then go out of business. I'm not going to lie. Video stores, MySpace. There was a web host I worked for that, maybe this is a bad idea to be on here publicly saying those things, but it happens. I blame Zuckerberg for MySpace. Facebook just destroyed us.
Yeah.
But it was fun.
That's fair.
Okay.
I understand that you tell fun stories to your young child, but you've eschewed coming up with your own creative stories.
Correct.
Let's talk about what you actually tell her.
Absolutely. Look, my wife's an amazing mother, and I am bringing down the curve for sure. But one thing I can do is I've given up on the idea that I can actually create something funny or entertaining for a 4-year-old. So I've just been retelling her this like plot lines of 80s movies, but taking out like the inappropriate or not for a 4-year-old's consumption. She's really into the Goonies right now, which obviously I have to remove the Fratellis and they're being chased by bad guys. So it's really just some kids find a map in their attic and drive their bikes down and then go into an abandoned restaurant and find a tunnel, find a pirate ship, and then they get out. But she's like, she loves it. So, Back to the Future. I think Indiana Jones. I think when you're 5, you can understand what a Nazi is, right? So then maybe I'll do like the Indiana Jones series, right? Isn't that who they fight in the first one? Doesn't he fight
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you should be introduced to Nazis at 5, but hey, I'm not going to object. I do have to know. My dog's
good side.
I do have to know, do you demonstrate the truffle shuffle when you're telling the
I just told you I
story?
wog every morning. Every morning I am truffle shuffling
different.
all over this town.
That's just for you. and your admirers out in the world.
Oh, the
Does
truffle
your daughter
shuffle.
get
Oh,
the
for
truffle
sure.
shuffle? That's
I haven't done that yet. I'm going to. But then she's going to do it at preschool. Look, there's going to be notes home. I already know that with me being a parent.
today. I have Matt Beran, aka the Negotiator, next in queue.
Quantum computing is it's a mind game. You really need to get your head wrapped around it a few times before you realize you don't understand it.
I did not anticipate us getting into quantum computing on the show today, and I'm pretty sure it's the first time it's come up. Speaking of things dying, what tips for composting?
Oh my
do you
gosh,
have
Rob.
for me?
Okay, I love how deep you're going on this. This is fantastic. And this is the danger of sharing personal stuff on LinkedIn too, by the way.
Let's talk
my tip for composting, if you actually are a composter, like you save your food scraps to turn it into compost, my trick for composting is to freeze everything. Everything that you're going to compost, you freeze it first, because then the cells all expand and then they explode. And so the structure of the food breaks down really fast. It's kind of like you're pre-chewing the food for the bacteria, the worms, and whatever else is going to, generate your compost.
That is a fabulous tip, and I know you did not see that one coming. You compost indoors. Is this true?
It is true. Yeah.
Okay. So for those that don't know, you live in the frozen tundra of Minnesota, up in the cities. So tell us why you choose to compost indoors, because there is a very good reason.
Since we have winter for 9 to 10 months out of the year, and most composters are outside, I needed a way to compost year round so I could make compost, really just remove waste from my life. And so I looked up this concept called vermiculture, which I had never heard of. And it's really worms are eating your food scraps, and you put them in this multi-layer farm. And what happens is, as you're putting food in this farm, you start by the bottom layer, you put the food in, you put the worms in, and then they eat it and they make the compost. Then you put a new tray on top and you put your food in, and the worms will crawl up into the food and then begin eating that new food. And through some light, you take that bottom tray and put that on top, throw some light on it, scares all the worms back down into the first layer where your food is, and then you can take your compost and throw it out. It's a very fascinating process, very geeky. And I do have an outdoor composter too that's a massive thing. And I think we're actually going to switch to just composting outside, because it does actually work kind of in the winter for Minnesota. And the composter we got is so big that I think we might be able to fit all of our winter food scraps in there and not worry about it.
If not, you just need to buy a bigger freezer.
Yeah. And you can store it. You can just, and that's the beauty of Minnesota winters. You do not need a bigger freezer in the winter. So I'm not sticking them in the freezer in the winter. It just goes outside. And I think that's where it's going to stay.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Maybe you and I will talk in more depth about composting in the future. I need to set up a compost pile. But I don't think that anyone hopped into this show thinking, oh, yeah, I'm going to get some composting tips. But I am curious, aside from composting and quantum computing, like, what do you really
I love it. It kind of in line with the composting, gardening. I love gardening. My personal goal is to be fully self-sufficient by the time that I retire, so that I don't have to buy a lot of extra food. I don't have to replace my clothes a lot. I'd like to reduce my costs and my impact on the earth as I grow as a human. And really, for me, it's an excuse to learn and understand the systems the waste and the problems that I'm creating as a human consumer, not necessarily to judge it because that is paralyzing, and no one can be perfect at being sustainable, but not taking a plastic bag at the grocery store has a huge impact. I can't, like, that little change in your life can have a massive impact on the trash that's blowing around in our earth. And so that's kind of what I geek out on the most, is probably sustainability after IT. And then after that, it's dogs. I love dogs. I've got 2 of them, and I spend so much time training them and spent loving them, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the gardening for just a moment. What is your favorite thing that you've grown?
I have
in
to
your
say
garden?
tomatoes. Tomatoes, if you don't, I didn't like tomatoes my whole life. And I realized why when I got older and started growing my own, that the ones in the grocery stores taste like garbage. They are absolutely terrible. You might as well eat a potato. They have basically the same flavor profile. And the tomatoes that you grow in your garden are so good that you can eat them alone. A tomato can be a meal. And if you haven't had a BLT with a fresh garden grown tomato, you are not living. It is key to your human experience to have a BLT, or if you're not a bacon person, you know, you're vegetarian, you know, do something else. Guac, lettuce, and tomato. I don't know exactly, but that's huge. And then I also really like spicy food. I am a huge spice lover. And so we grow quite a few different peppers. I think we have 3 different kinds this year. And if you like spicy food, DM me. I will bring you a jalapeno that will kill you. It is amazing.
Amos, Tenumah, thanks for being next in queue. I am surely the most famous host of a podcast that you have ever appeared on. Would you confirm that, please?
Oh, absolutely.
You're a liar.
I think you told me I had to do George Costanza's show first. And then if that went well, which I did.
Right. That was the contractual agreement. I was like, look, you go talk to George Costanza on his nationally recognized podcast. And if you do well, and then NPR. Yep.
Right.
And if you do well, that too. If you do well, then I will allow you to grace next in queue. And you did. You passed all the tests, and now here you are. So thanks. Thanks for joining. Are we just angrier in general as customers about all kinds of things that don't have to do with the companies? And does that fuel our need to have revenge somewhere? And we just point that ire?
Oh, 1,000%. But it does have to do with the company to an extent, meaning while all of this was going on, guess what these companies were doing? Ratcheting up the promises, satisfaction guarantee, life-changing this. So I came in, I had problems, I turned on the TV, I saw your commercial. Your commercial didn't say you sold shitty hamburgers. You're like, we sell happiness in a box. And then I get there, and there is
I
no
get
happiness.
this sad burger that just makes me depressed, and I'm like, where's the happiness? This thing isn't even like stacked right.
Exactly. So we are angrier as a society, but I think we have not done ourselves a favor because every company now cares about the customer experience. There's a giant banner at my post office, you know, the U.S. Post Office, customer experience or death. What didn't say that exactly. Yeah, I think you're onto something with the explosion of channels, which, by the way, no one asked for. I remember when omni-channel was the du jour goal. Oh, we just need this omni-channel experience. And I've got articles and I've got receipts from way back in 2009 where I'm like, you know, omni-channel is a giant distraction because like I'd never met a customer who said, hey, you know what I really want? I want more ways to contact you people. Or worse, after I've contacted you through more ways, I need a way for you so that I can go from this. I could be in Best Buy and I could do the thing and then I could pick up. The only people who dreamt this nightmare up are the technologists and the consultants. I don't hear any of this from where it matters. So yes, once you expanded the complex into, we've got a multi-channel of choice, all of this, fanciful sounding concepts that we're all going to look back with regret of until you ask and talk to real customers. By the way, my new voice, which is relatively new over this last post-COVID, was because I stopped talking to people like you, Rob, and I started talking to actual customers. And every time I would open my mouth and say what I was working on, they all just get, well, is there a way to get a human? Like, they just came back to I don't really care about half of what you've just said. So you're right. And then once you've expanded it, and then once to CX it, you have to make it ubiquitous. Once you brought marketing into this, now we're going to send them an outreach via text, and we need somebody to respond to them. And when they tweeted us, we've done all of this. And so then the definition of then it was a call center, then we made it a contact center. But then marketing is sending out outreaches, contacts that the contact center doesn't know about. I think we complicated it intentionally. And then once you do, right, you've got to then have people to manage it. It's like a little bit like the government, right? You expose departments, you have regulations, you expand all this, then you got to hire people. So it grows, and then the people you're serving keep wondering, I just want to talk to someone.
Right.
Or I just want my check or whatever the thing to just arrive.
Yeah.
And we've lost sight of that.
His name is Tony Haun. Maybe you've heard of him. I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of Dungeons and Dragons and people management. So you sent me a little blurb, and I want you to expand on this. I don't even know what question I'm asking other than tell me more, Tony. Tell me more.
What is it? Yeah, so I've been working on a light framework for people management. Everyone's got their version of a 9-box or some kind of 360 feedback survey thing, and some kind of write-up with some kind of software. And all of it seemed well-intended, but insufficient. And it really felt like we were, with all of those kinds of typical practices, we were depending too much on a rigid form that didn't capture all of the important details of somebody's performance and what value they brought to the company. I was trying to think of, well, what would I want as an employee? Like, what do I think's more fair and transparent and actually creates value for those meetings, instead of them being like a buddy, let me kind of just socially talk to you and get some updates that I could easily read in an email, to more substantial conversations around the key points of your employment that really matter for your overall performance, but also your longevity, how long you're probably going to stay with the company. And so it eventually came out to be the system based on D&D. Like, if you have a good character creation module feature for your RPG, your video game, I'm probably going to play that for hours just before I even get started in the game. It's how obsessive I am about that stuff, and I really enjoy good character creation. But even for pen and paper D&D, right, when I play with friends, and so I'll actually put effort into that. So it's broken up into 5 sections. The first section is just about your class, right? So if you're an archer, if you are a warrior, if you are a mage, if you are whatever it is, this is just about the person's job role. Like, what's your job? What is the core of what we expect you to do at work every single day? And so core responsibilities for me should take up about 80 to 90% of your time on any given week. And so are those clear? And often, as you know, jobs change over time. So new things get added, some things fall away, but nobody ever keeps track of that. But this makes sure that you do keep track of that. The second section is about a person's disposition. We call them attributes, right? So, and it's a way to talk about someone's personality. And we use the terms positive and negative, but don't think of that in a typical good versus bad type of way. It's more like yin and yang, right? It's like two parts of a whole, right? So these are the things that make up who you are. And if we can talk about it and we come up with a language that the manager and the employee understand mutually, we can then more easily talk about relationships at work. So you hit this section, and after you kind of work this out, and a lot of it's self-identified from the employee. The third section is really about, we just call them skills, or in HR speak, competencies. So we label all of the core competencies required for the job out. We lay out the competencies that an employee aspires to develop for their next career step. And we make sure that we're acknowledging the growth of the ones that you're going to focus on to grow, so that people are building for themselves a step-by-step roadmap for what their next promotion should be within your company. And they feel like they have a tangible long-term goal, and you're actually looking for opportunities to stretch a person, challenge them, develop new skills on the job. But what it also does is, as a team, it gives you a competency map of everyone's skills. So you know, if you need to hire somebody new, what kinds of additional competencies or new ones would be helpful for your team to have overall. Section 4 is really simple. It's just, we call them feats, right? So the D&D language is coming in. These are your huge accomplishments throughout the year. I found a lot of employees never keep track of them. They don't know how they contribute to the workplace. And usually when I start doing this with people, I've even done it with people who I just mentor, who are in other departments in the company, but come to me for mentorship. When we start doing this, a lot of them are shocked. They're like, I delivered a lot of value for the company this past time. I'm like, yeah, you totally did. Like, the last section is just a parking lot. It's called biography. You know, this is the part where you don't have to do it in a D&D game, but I always do it, where I write in, like, they're from this village and this happened to them and this is where they come from. And yeah, the backstory. So it's a place for you to spend at least a little bit of time every other week to get to know your employee a little bit more on a personal basis. But it's also a parking lot. Hopefully you develop an actual positive relationship with your employees. And sometimes they'll feel comfortable with you to share more personal matters. You don't ever document any of that stuff or record it unless you're required to by law, if it's very extreme. But it's also a place to, like, a lot of people want to talk about mental health, but they don't know where to do it. And a lot of employees are unaware of the full benefits package they have when it comes to things like mental health or other kinds of medical care. And this is a place where you could, if they feel comfortable sharing things with you, you could actually really help somebody out in a different way. So that's what that's for. It's just these 5 sections. Some weeks you just go over it very quickly because nothing has changed or nothing eventful happened. But at least you're touching base every other week to say, hey, we need to talk about these 5 things. How are they going? And, you share, the document is shared between manager and employee. So as we start the new company, it's a general point requirement that I have for all my people managers. Doesn't matter how junior or senior they are. If I ask them how any employee is doing, the answer should be really close to what that employee would say if I sat down with them and say, "Hey, how are you doing?"
Yeah, it's great transparency. And I feel like we all just added some people management points to our skill set in this conversation. So I'm going to say at least plus 25. I don't know exactly what we gained. I probably need to roll a die to figure that out, but I don't have one handy. Next in Queue is brought to you by Happy To and is produced by me, Rob Dwyer. If you enjoy this podcast, please by all means subscribe and or rate this podcast in iTunes or your favorite podcast app. But more importantly, please tell just one person about this podcast. Word of mouth is the best way for people to discover new content. As always, thanks for listening.